cosmico regolare realtà, respiro di un'immagine, sinfonia di civiltà, confuso proteinia di cellule ribelli, vado verso l'universo, l'attraverserò, senza stella fatti vedere, io mi fermerò. Oh, shine lei, la mia libertà, shine lei, oh no. Oh, shine lei, oh sogno realtà, shine lei, oh no. Vuole nella mia vita, no, non è finita, io mi fermerò, sciogli le mie vene, il cielo un po' normale, io ci crederò. Shine lei, la mia libertà, shine lei, oh no. Oh, shine lei, oh sogno realtà, shine lei, oh no. Vuole nella mia vita, no, non è finita, io mi fermerò, scioglie le mie vene, in cielo un po' del mare, io ci crederò. Armonia metallica, concreta realtà, videoclip elettronico e l'olio di civiltà, confuso progenia di cellule ribelli, volo verso l'universo, l'attraverserò, senza sembra farti vedere, io mi fermerò. Oh, shine lei, la mia libertà, shine lei, oh no. Oh, shine lei, oh sogno realtà, shine lei, oh no. Oh, shine lei, la mia libertà, shine lei, oh no. Oh, shine lei, oh sogno realtà, shine lei, oh no. Vuole nella mia vita, no, non è finita, io mi fermerò, scioglie le mie vene, in cielo un po' del mare, io ci crederò.
And we're live. Got another episode of the Patriotarchy broadcast coming to you live. I'm here with my fellow host, Burger Meister.
Howdy, howdy.
And I should say the esteemed Burger Meister this time around, because I forgot to say it last time. But we're going to be talking a bit on, well, probably a little bit lighter of a topic, but who knows. We're Burger and I are like onions. We got layers. So who knows how in depth we could get with this, but we're going to be talking about memes. They come in all formats, shapes, and sizes.
Now, layers. Now, that was an old meme.
I think I got that from Shrek. Yeah, pretty sure
That's
I got that
where
from
we
Shrek.
all got it. Back in, the mystical, foggy days of the 2000s.
Now, the funny part is like when you say mystical, my mind, my thoughts go towards a mystical figure in the meme realm, but I'm gonna put him on the back burner for a bit. I think we'll approach him eventually, but more so up front. Obviously, when somebody sees a meme, we got all kinds of. Well, we could have a specific emotion towards it, or a range of emotions, or just completely disregard it, or maybe even take that meme to new heights and turn it into something we could put the pedal to the metal on. Like for me, I know for a period of time between me and my buddies, I was pretty high on the Star Wars memes for a while. Not so much that I'm like a huge Star Wars fan, although I did a almost 4 hour podcast on it with JJ, aka Rusty, on Star Wars. I know, anyway. It just was more so like the memes were funny, and I mean, it's kind of hard to find somebody who doesn't know what Star Wars is. So, it's because it was relatable to like all my friends. We all got good laughs out of it and stuff. And, the political stuff gets tiring after a while. You can only send so many pictures of cute kittens in memes or cute puppies in memes, although I probably never get sick of the puppies. But, it's just, it comes with a message, like if you have an imposing figure like a Darth Vader and him saying something silly in the meme, it'll totally like throw you off. Or if you have, what's one of the better ones? And like the Anakin meme where he's been overused so many times, and this was Anakin before he became Darth Vader in the third movie. And he killed all of those sand people. Yeah, I've seen that meme several times where it was like in different formats. I've even seen it for a popular beer called Yingling, where it's like the first panel, like, yeah, he's like, yeah, I drank them all. And the second panel, he's like, yeah, I did it. And the third panel, it's just him like in a field with a case of beer, like almost passed out. So, I mean, memes got all kinds of different connotations and stuff. But as far as like a quick, simple message goes, it's got to be almost near to rhetorical by this point, with especially, us being on, I guess, what would be considered the right of things. With us, we see a meme format, and it's almost rhetorical to probably the both of us. And obviously to the left, we know they can't meme, but they also just don't understand, I guess you could say, contradictory humor, dichotomous humor, just to be a hypocrite, just for being the sake of a hypocrite, in some of these memes, because, why not? But yeah, Burger, I guess I let on for a little bit. So what's your shtick?
Well, yeah, ironic memes. That's usually where people call the last one that you're describing there. But yeah, The ability to make fun of oneself. That's something that, because the right and the left have their own sort of memetics. But I think a lot of what makes the right-wing memes so much better is the fact that we have this ability to not take ourselves so seriously all the time, right? Like, you see the deal about leftist memes being like walls of text all the time. And the usual reason that people give for this is, well, their ideas are so unnatural that they have to spend half the time trying to explain them and, using mental gymnastics to justify them. But I think really it's even simpler than that. They'll go on these grand diatribes in what's supposed to be, just a funny little meme because they take themselves too seriously. But just with that little bit aside, memes are such a massive topic. They cover so many different areas. And you're going on about some of the very early, much more kind of normie memes. Earlier on, cat puppy, haha, stuff like that. And to some extent, that's kind of merged with the later edgy political stuff in the form of Doge, being the most famous example. Doge was originally one of those, 9gag or rage comic era memes from like 2011. Where they have the little multicolor stripe background and it's just like top text, bottom text. And there really was no significance to it. But it came back, shortly after the whole, Pepe deal around the 2016 election. And Doge all of a sudden started getting pretty based. He started having some opinions a little more radical than Pepe in a lot of cases. And it was pretty funny to see sometimes. Those are some of my favorite memes, actually, are the Doge ones. They're coming out nowadays. Just because of the different facial expressions they put on them. But yeah, going back to that kind of early, like, rage comic era of memes. And those are coming back, too, because you see the reuse of things like the troll face, especially, but a few of the other ones from that era too are now being recycled after about 10 years of relative disuse. So there's a very cyclical nature to these things. And where you really begin to see this originate, though, you have the edgy political stuff from the Chans, right? Just edgy in general. It wasn't even political at first, but gradually, as Poll became kind of the defining board for what 4chan was to the world, it kind of took over the memetics as well, especially because the political memes had much greater impact on the real world. But that was not the only strain of meme thought. You also had here now I'm sounding like a leftist, sounding all serious, but you also had this other kind of a little more, I guess, harmless, just lighthearted type of meme that came from places like 9gag and iFunny, the much derided site of iFunny, and all these other little sites. Newgrounds was an early one. In like the late 2000s is when this really started taking off. And that's about when you start seeing the term meme be used in this context, I think, is right around the turn of the 2010s. So around 2010, 2011. Before that, they would just call them, reaction images on the Chans, or I don't know if you were ever familiar with demotivators. Like the little motivational, well, I'm just gonna ask you real quick. Do you know what those old motivational posters were?
Yeah. Talk about a boomer one. Talk about boomer memes.
Well, yeah, I remember back around 2010 when demotivators, which are just ironic versions of that, those were some of the first memes. And, you know, it was a whole category, but people were posting memes without knowing what to call them yet. And so, oh, here's on, you know, forums, which used to be more of a thing back then too, you know, oh, here's a demotivator thread, you know, about whatever, you know, game or, you know, fandom or whatever this forum was about. So, yeah, it existed a long time before people actually knew what to call it in that sense. I don't know if you wanted to kind of take off from there. I've been ranting.
Yeah, well, we might as well meme and rant meme. I mean, come on, man. So we're good at that. But it's funny. It's funny that you bring up the motivational posters, because I remember like a couple of my first, I guess you could say, internships. They had an office where there was one at a radio station I worked at, and I was only in the office a couple times, but oh my gosh, like it was an alternative rock station. But the funny part is that they had these motivational type posters in there, and to me, that's not, you know, like it's probably some quintessential irony right there, because, you know, here you're thinking the people that work for this alternative rock radio station, you know, are going to be your typical college liberals who, you know, I guess embrace all the stuff that you would expect them to embrace, but kind of like just juxtaposed with all the boomer motivational material around them. You know, in a clean office setting too, on top of it, which is also, you know, like your typical white collar, you know, clean cut setting that you just don't expect those kind of people to be in there. But I mean, you know, on a professional level, everybody has to act in a capacity where it's, you know, civility obviously has to be exercised. So yeah, I mean, it's funny because it's like you always just have the memetics, I guess, in your real life too, because when you see certain things, and the irony in not taking yourself so seriously is, well, to me it is hilarious, but obviously, you know, you don't want to be, you know, so sarcastic and cynical to one point where, you know, all seriousness is everything's just so serious, or you just, I guess, you're a complete nihilist, or, you know, you don't want to just be completely jovial all the time and, you know, never take yourself seriously, because that's obviously an issue too. But you're right with like all the leftist stuff and the text walls. I mean, just being so unnatural, and the whole memetics and stuff. And you mentioned him, but yeah, I guess we'll go with Doge first. Doge is funny. I mean, that's yeah. Just his faces alone, like it wouldn't even have to be a meme. Like, especially like his mean mug makes me laugh all the time. It wouldn't even matter what kind of text there is with it. But like Doge's mean mug is hilarious. His happy face is cute. But it's funny because you can, like, well, as a human being, you know, we kind of have a natural connection, I guess, to dogs. And a dog, like, expressing like a human emotion is, I guess, an instinctual meme kind of in and of itself. Now that's kind of deep because of how, you know, we've cohabitated or have coexisted in a sense with another species of animal. You know, I mean, that's kind of a mind bender. But it's like, to me, seeing like his angry face, it's always like I feel like I make the same face when like somebody cuts me off in traffic. You know, I mean, it's like you feel like you look at that face and you're like, man, I feel that, but I'm pissed off now too, because I feel how pissed off he is. So I mean, it is kind of funny because you pissed off for obviously no reason, but you're not, like you said, you're not taking yourself so seriously. And it's memes are like, yeah, I mean, some can be definite motivators, some can be really uplifting, some can be extremely white-pilled, some can be like I like church father memes. Like I love just starting my day off with like a quote from a saint, just to kind of get my mindset going and help me out a little bit. As far as like a much deeper, memes go, the church fathers are obviously huge. And I'm not saying the church fathers are memes, because no, but it's kind of, it's kind of nice how they like put, their quotations into a digestible format. And that's really like where I was getting at with the rhetoric, and like you said, 4chan, and how that whole culture kind of built itself and sustained itself. It's where that momentum has kind of, that momentum has carried itself into these different spheres, of political thought and political theory, and even like time periods too, because I've seen some memes and stuff, and then I hear, or I see conversations with you and others in some of the chats and stuff, and I'm like, well, that's not what it was like at all. Like I see a meme about, the Middle Ages and, how bad it was and stuff, and I mean, to an extent, I'm sure, it was pretty bad. But to another extent, it's like, you guys clear a lot of the record up on some of that stuff. And it's like, well, shoot. Am I going to really learn all this stuff via just memes, or, go out and do some actual research? And I feel like a lot of the political spectrum nowadays, especially in America, if you don't have like, if you have just like a basic understanding of it and just, want to tout whatever party line you want to tout, then by all means, go for it. You might as well stick to your guns and just go for it. But if you kind of like want to get out of that whole, well, I guess the best meme I could put that in is a hamster wheel. Then yeah, I mean, you probably should, to get a better understanding and a better grounding of, of what you might be looking for as far as breaking the spell, breaking away from the rhetoric that is probably, well, by this point, it's gone out of control, and I mean, people can't even tolerate it anymore, So
that's a meme in itself, Like I don't know if you ever seen the like the meme where they've got the machine with holding the guy's eyes open, and it's just like all the words around him, based, cringe, zoomer, cucked, this, that, and the other thing, just like being bombarded with like meme words and phrases. And he's just like, I can't take it anymore.
And I mean, that's basically what like a lot of rhetoric does boil down to. And like you said, the left has to, the positions of it are just so unnatural that even somebody who isn't politically minded, would probably be pretty turned off by a lot of their, well, I guess their stances,
I mean, yeah, politics aside, because, I really don't want to spend, a whole podcast just owning the libs or whatever, because there's plenty of places to do that, right? I prefer just talking about memes kind of in and of themselves. And, in that regard, I like that you brought up the point of the need to realize that there are facts outside of these memes that may not necessarily line up with the memetic narrative that's being created, right? And this just goes into that constant point of having a fact-driven narrative. The best memes, the ones that are always just simply the best, plain and simple. You know, and it's the best humor too, right? It's funny because it's true. You know, that's always the best kind of joke. And memes are the same way. You know, because what a meme is a soundbite or an image that forms part of a greater narrative, right? And it can be a humorous narrative, it can be this, that, the other thing. It's a storytelling tool. And so memes and memetics, when they're used to further a fact-driven narrative, then yes, they can be wonderful, as they have been for years in many cases now. But, you know, the equal hazard does exist where sometimes when they take on a life of their own, you know, people can meme things into reality, you might say, where people will start acting based off of the memes rather than, you know, rather than the memes being a reflection of their actions. You know, they'll begin to just go off things just because people, you know, are laughing and joking about it. You know, that's become a meme in itself. You know, you'll see like a cringing or laughing Pepe, and he'll be saying, you know, he fell for this meme or whatever. You know, so it's become self-aware, and I think that's part of what makes it so endearing at times.
Because it plays off of our emotions, and what drives us is like, well, human beings. And yeah, I mean, we could make several podcasts of just owning the libs, but you're right. Who wants to do that anymore when you can just meme it? And now, like with Doge, it's kind of funny on how like we pick, and we have a thing, I guess, for memetics in like the animal sense. And I guess with animals, there's a certain kind of like connotation for, well, to personify it. And like you said, a meme is a soundbite, a small clip, or something that's part of a bigger narrative. And that's probably what drove, well, once again, I'm not gonna harp too much on it, but that's what probably drove most of the left nuts when you know who ran in 2016, because he basically memed himself in the office. And I mean, he basically ran with punchy language, with very rhetorical, you know, euphemisms and rhetorical devices, and just did it, you know, just went full bore. And, you know, I mean, his name is a meme. His political campaign is a meme. And he didn't care. That's the other part. He didn't care. You wanted people to run wild with it. And out of that bore a whole different animal. And the whole different animal was, you mentioned him a couple times, and, you know, Pepe. Pepe is Keck. Keck is Pepe. And I mean, that's kind of what, like, I guess launched my interest into it more and more. And I'm like, what the heck is this frog? I'm like, it's a stupid frog, you know? He's making these sarcastic faces, making these happy faces. You know, he's crying, you know, I mean, and he's making fun of people and stuff. Like they have a whole music video, which will the song will be featured in this podcast. But man, I'll tell you what, it's funny, because it's like to get to the point to where people can be triggered by a stupid cartoon frog to think that, you know, you're whatever kind of ism they want you to think that you are, when it comes from, you know, leftist kind of point of view. That is part of that rhetorical punch, you know, that quick soundbite, that quick image to just make somebody just fly off the handle. And obviously, as human beings, you know, we're driven by our personal ideologies, overall arching ideologies, obviously our beliefs, whether it be in religion or unfortunately the world, or, you know, I mean, there's all different facets when it comes to that, because that can get complicated. And like you said, people can literally get their narrative off of memes, believe that, and become a meme in and of themselves. And I mean, that's just, you know, I mean, when you find a person like that, I mean, that's a gold mine, right? But it's funny because it's like, it makes me think of a lot of people I've run into on both ends of the spectrum. And man, I'll tell you what, there's a lot of overlap too with that. This kind of the crazier part about it. And with memetics, it's so weird to me because it's like how they try to quantify it. You know, they try to like codify like the whole meme spectrum paradigm. I don't know what you call it, but they try to they try to formulate it, formalize it and try to turn it into, a kind of an algorithm too, is how, what's going to be the next meme, what's going to be this, what's going to be that. Whereas to me, it's kind of like, we it's funny because you can run wild with almost anything, and who knows if it's going to catch on, right?
Yeah. It's so funny when you see elements of that. And this has been going on for years, where you had these, either state or non-state actors who have made these very serious attack plans on, the concept of the meme, or they try to categorize and break them down, say, well, this meme means this, and this one means this. When in reality, next week, just because you said that, it now changes and means something entirely different, or, it just turns into making fun of you pretty much. Like, no one even cares what the meme was. Now it's just being used like, haha, look at these dumb glowies, or whatever you want to actually say in that case. It's an exercise in futility to try and harness and control this sort of thing in a top-down manner. It's inherently decentralized, and so fundamentally, it's going to reflect a grassroots sort of culture. It's one of the few cultures in the mainstream that is not really astroturfed at all to speak of. It is very, grassroots in the true sense of the word. It's the real pop culture. If you want to say that, like, it's what's popular. It's what the average person actually thinks is funny. But then again, you also have sort of a delineation between people who follow the memetic narrative and people who don't. And the people who don't are normies. I mean, that's kind of how it started. Was, what do we in the distant right call people, right? We call them normies, if they don't understand or they're unenlightened, whatever we want to think of them as. But that came from the Chans, and it came from a very apolitical sort of idea, which is sort of the sense of rejection that a lot of people on there felt from society at large. It's inherently a term used by a group of outsiders who have been, rejected, or who themselves reject society. And so it's just a very dissident, in a very fundamental sense, term to delineate oneself with. And so you see one of these strands that sort of leads into the dissident right as we know it today, is just the sort of disillusioned, sort of average kid who just goes online and is sick and tired of the world around him, doesn't understand it, doesn't understand why it doesn't understand him. And he goes and finds these people and is able to have genuine fun. So, I don't know what you think of that.
Well, it's true, though, because, I mean, it's like you brought up a good point that it is not only something that is organic, it doesn't come from AstroTurf, and obviously it being grassroots, but more so with it being something decentralized, and then those with the powers that be want it to be something that becomes centralized. Well, then the next week, it could mean something completely different, and then they're getting ripped on for it, which is funny because it seems a lot like a South Park episode more so than anything. And that's a meme too, right there. There's a whole slew of memes with the South Park memes, but you don't like real life situations even. I mean, the most famous of them all in real life situations, I guess, for me, would be like the Florida Man memes. Just absurd circumstances, a more absurd headline, and you didn't even need a meme. All you need is the mugshot and the headline, and that right there, you have a meme. and the funny part is that it's like it makes you think of how they got into that situation, why they got in that situation, and obviously, well, they got apprehended by the law, so they're going to have a hard time getting out of that situation, possibly. But I mean, the fact that to go and have genuine fun about it and laugh about it is something as stupid as that. I mean, it's funny because it's like that's what they want. There's a definite sense of real human interaction, but the other part is that they want to politicize it, right? And they've always wanted to politicize it, and that's part of the fun too, because it's kind of like nana nana boo boo, stick your head in doo doo. I mean, I hate to sound completely juvenile about it, but it's like you don't understand, what we're trying to do here and what we're trying to accomplish, which overall, I mean, could be absolutely nothing because of how decentralized it is, or you do obtain a mascot like Doge, Keck, Pepe, Feels Good Man, which I kind of are all three of the same thing. Who else am I forgetting? Well, I mean, Doge and Pepe or Keck are the only two that really come to I guess the strong really come to mind in a strong sense.
I mean, Wojak maybe.
Oh, are you talking about the Chad Yes, the soy boy Wojak and Chad Yes?
Yeah, and Virgin versus Chad, that whole meme too, which that has a story in and of itself, which is very interesting, because the whole idea of a Chad, right? It came from these groups of, once again, these disillusioned young kids who didn't understand why they didn't fit in with society, and maybe they were just genuine rejects, they, couldn't get a girl. They were socially awkward. They had all these problems, they weren't athletic kids, maybe they were, a little too cerebral. A lot of them didn't have dads, so nobody really made them go outside or develop themselves physically. And so they're put at a disadvantage against others in society, and they don't understand why. And so they kind of create this memetic enemy for them to focus their angst on. And it's the Chad. Chad's the guy who always had it easy. Everything. He has the muscles. He's got everything. The women, the money. Just it all rains down on him. But there's also a bit of a in the early memes. There's a bit of a venom towards him too, because they also portray him as being stupid and vile in a lot of cases. And not having pure intentions. Not just being immoral out of either ignorance or just genuinely not being a good person. But, that's exactly what it is. It's venom. It's envy and people, attempting to belittle others for not being them or to kind of rally support against them. But this actually flips on its head. And this is one very interesting thing about the whole Chad dynamic. Eventually, as these kids get older, they begin to realize that most of the time these Chads are successful because they're doing things that make people successful, right? They're actually improving themselves, and usually they did at a younger age because they were actually taught to. And as, the incels, the virgins, whatever you want to call them, start learning about this as they get older, they start to embrace those values themselves. And the Chad, as he's portrayed, suddenly stops being so crass. He becomes wholesome. He's the big guy at the gym that helps out all the new guys coming in. He's just this superior kind of ubermensch, and the virgin is just the loser. It becomes a lot more black and white, but it's kind of I don't want to say an apotheosis, but I guess maybe a redemption arc. It's hard to describe. But I really think it is the collective experience of a whole category of young men within a generation growing up. I think that's fundamentally how these memes have changed over the years and what they've developed into nowadays. It is kind of the, I want to say the Gen Zennial, that millennial Zoomer kind of borderline group. Their coming of age story in the form of of funny cartoons online.
Oh, I definitely feel that. Like I as growing up, my strong father figure was my grandfather, and I was put in the martial arts at a pretty young age. Yeah, and that obviously helped develop me. I mean, definitely gave me confidence when it came to women. Definitely gave me confidence when it came to, dealing with life and having doubts and stuff. But isn't that a tale as old as time? The Chad, the guy who's got it all, the muscles, the women, the success. It's just screaming like high school quarterback to me. Like, the guy, the captain of the football team, the All-American kid, the guy who's got the probably the smoking hot cheerleader as his girlfriend, and is just the guy, in high school. And then you have the computer nerd or the nerdy guy who hasn't seen the sun, besides going to school, can't even talk to a girl, much less look at one. So it is funny on how that's always a tale as old as time, because that's, the other thing that's coming to mind is always, you always have the jealous, our malicious type trying to, kind of overthrow, I guess, the just king. I guess, and this is going to be another juvenile thing, but Scar and Mufasa. You had the just king of Mufasa, and then Scar, his brother, his evil brother, was malicious and basically it killed Mufasa because he wanted the power and the pride so bad. Well, he had the pride, and everything went to crap. So, there's obviously different dynamics with that, and using a Disney movie is probably, not something out of the Bible, but I'm sure, the other thing would probably be Sodom and Gomorrah would probably be something close to that. But obviously Mufasa and Scar are a little bit more accessible, and I'm being a boomer, I guess, with that meme. But it's kind of funny because it's like on a cultural level on how all those things pertain to themselves. You know, how all those stories are kind of tales as old as time itself, because you have the Chad, the Hulk, you know, the hulking guy who's rough around the edges at first, but then as life goes on, you know, he tempers out. You know, he hits his peak, wherever that may be, and he might still even be on his peak. But you know, he tempers out, and he sees the value of his wisdom and how he helps his fellow guys out. You know, how he's like, true, I got your back, you know, got your back, man. And with that, there's something obviously admirable and virtuous to that. And like you said, it's not a complete apotheosis, which is pretty funny because because there's definitely redemption arcs to characters, and there's definitely, well, where they fall flat on their face, you know, and are irredeemable. But by this point, you know, I mean, it kind of makes you think like somebody like especially if we're gonna get, I guess, kind of religious with it now, is Kek. You know, the whole memetics of Kek, and Kek literally came from ancient Egypt. Like, that's where the whole thing started, and the fact that is the god of chaos, and we embraced a political candidate in 2016 as, I guess, an agent of chaos towards the political class, towards the ruling class of this country, is, well, I mean, I don't know, do coincidences happen? Or is it something a little bit more powerful at work? Or, no, I'm not going to get Gnostic about it either, but, or was it something to like how he used Pepper Keke, or how he used Pepper Kek to create this whole, I guess, alternative reality. I mean, you had Kekistan, you had the politically incorrect jokes, you had the basic triggering of the other political side, and getting them, you know, all into a tizzy about a really rather, I mean, harmless cartoon character. I mean, in like the most earnest, you know, way I could put it. You know, it's I mean, it is kind of, it's a joke, but it's, you know, it's hilarious, and it's also entertaining at a lot of points in time. And it's just to, you know, see that rhetoric build on itself and even become a bigger soundbite, a bigger conversation piece, some of showing some of the unfortunate sides of the elite and political class, you know, by exposing them, you know, and also showing, well, I mean, just downright human emotion and human feeling, human understanding, you know, like you said, the guys who, you know, like to meme or find understanding in memes, when they don't, you know, they feel like their opinions, their outlook, their sense of belonging in this world. And I mean, this doesn't go for just men, you know, this goes for women too, obviously. But men obviously I feel like, you know, we use things as more of a utility than, you know, women want to make themselves famous by showing their behinds on Instagram. I guess they're using it as a utility too, in a sense, but, you know, not to us, you know, obviously we use it more as like for what it's, you know, literally socializing. But it's funny because it's like, you have that idea, you have that snippet in time, you have that, well, mascot like Pep, like Kek, Pepe, or Doge, or Wojak. And it kind of launches itself into, I guess, the stratosphere, and it's being as apolitical and benign as possible, for all intention. I mean, it's just, it's like a lost image search, and then all of a sudden it just kind of explodes and turns itself into something that creates that momentum for said faction, said group of people, like the dissident right, or whatever grouping of people you might want to boil it down to. And so with that feeling of, I guess I'm kind of new to it in a sense, but also like being, I guess you could say, quote unquote, I was ortho-pilled before a lot of this. And a lot of this information, is somewhat new to me. Some of it's a lot of retread, but, I'm like, yeah, I mean, some of it makes absolute sense. And then some of it, I'm just like, it's garbage, that's obviously garbage. Yeah. And one of like the biggest factors for me was just seeing the memes kind of evolve themselves, the humor obviously evolves itself, but the other thing you brought up, which was really interesting, is the cyclical nature of it. And I do really believe that there is a definite cyclical nature to, well, I guess a lot of just the West, it's just got a lot of the same thing, the same rehash, the same rhetoric, the same thing, like you have two different generations saying something different, but in a lot of ways they're saying the same thing. So, I mean, that could be in and of itself a meme because of on how we use like the generational gap memes. I guess you could call it that, like on how I guess our generations would go and blame everything on the boomers because of how they left us with what we got to clean up. So I don't know what you want to get at with the cyclical nature of the rhetoric and I guess the memetics on the momentum and how that whole thing could be addressed.
Well, before I get into the depths of that, just touching on the generational memes real quick. So yeah, there's been an interesting phenomenon, and it's developed over time, where you'll have these generational archetypes, and they'll take on different forms too. Like, Boomer is probably the most famous one, right? Because he's the most maligned. Just about everybody on all sides of the spectrum, have been engaging in Boomer hate for, the past decade or past half decade at least, in some form or another, right? Like, there's kind of that perennial, leftist progressive push that will always say, well, the old's bad, the new's good, you're being old and intolerant, you're on the wrong side of history, yada, yada, yada. And that's always there. But a much stronger upcurrent came from the right in recent years that basically is saying, how could you let this happen? They see the America that existed in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. They see when a lot of the biggest moves, certainly not the only ones, and arguably not the most significant moves, but the most noticeable changes in our society, they look back to when they actually began. And it's largely during the time of these boomers. Now, granted, a lot of it was when they were too young to actually impact these things, but that's kind of a whole nother element to this. How much blame they may have for this, that, and the other. That's a discussion in and of itself. But yeah, it's a kind of a disgust at how these things were allowed to happen by people who are supposed to be your elders. People who are supposed to guide and support and nourish you into leading a successful life as an adult. And people feel abandoned. They look back to people who did have that support network, to people in a lot of other places that still do have that network, because this is boomers a very American meme, right? It's extremely American specific, and to some extent the rest of the Anglosphere, but mostly just American. And yeah, people who become educated in other cultures see this in history, and they're asking, well, what happened? Why didn't we get this too? And so it becomes a gradual diatribe, and becomes a bit of a blame game too. The one group will always try to blame the other for its own faults and failings, and this does happen. But likewise, the darn millennials, that's kind of the other side of that coin that popped up earlier. And this is the boomers themselves, looking at younger generations and the lack of work ethic especially. But when you look at it, though, and this is where the boomers lack understanding. The millennials might blame boomers for things they might not have been at fault for, but the same goes vice versa, because you begin to look at somebody who's in a dying society that doesn't care for them. They don't feel ownership in it. They don't feel a responsibility to it the way that the boomers did. And why would they want to work hard in this kind of society? Why would they want to try to push and grind and, just really make a name for themselves in a society that doesn't care about them, doesn't want to reward them for it? There's just fundamentally nobody wants to work and not be appreciated for it. And this doesn't have to be financial or monetary. It can be just recognition, just value. And when you don't have that, there's no motivation to continue. Nobody is going to put their best effort in for somebody that just fundamentally doesn't appreciate it. And that's what I think a lot of the boomers on this side of the argument don't really understand when they see these younger generations, or they see the nihilism. They think it's just people being edgy teenagers forever. Well, there's some of that. There is definitely a extension of adolescence into the 20s and sometimes beyond. But by that same token, perhaps it's because we don't have a society that really encourages people to grow up, or gives them an incentive to grow up, or to be a productive adult in that sense. But anyway, now, generational wars aside. And, well, one more thing on that is that the wide generalization too, right? Because it's not just referring to an individual generation of people anymore. Boomer, millennials, zoomer. These are referring to three cohorts of people that are not specifically tied to generations. The boomers are just old people, right? They're just whoever's older than your particular cohort in this argument. And so millennials, who kind of created this whole trichotomy, if you will, are the ones in the middle, and so it's all structured relative to them. The boomers were the old generation in their time, but now you have the zoomers, who are Generation Z, and they are begun to appropriate the boomer meme and targeting millennials and Gen Xers, especially with it. So you're seeing kind of a shift in what a generation is thought of as that isn't quite keeping up with the actual generation brackets. But yeah, there's some cyclicality to that. You will see an idea play out in society, and it'll kind of reach its apex and then go into decline. You know, a society will have enough of a certain virtue for a certain period of time, and then gradually, over time, that will erode, and then, you know, that virtue will come to the fore again in the thoughts of the people because they need it again, because they're lacking it. You know, and when the one virtue is strong, another virtue will often be weak, or another vice will be strong. You know, there's just a bunch of different factors, but they all kind of balance each other in a way. And so when one thing is out of balance, which being imperfect humans in a worldly society, something always is, you sort of have that perpetual rebalancing that occurs, and it lends itself to cyclicality in that sense. So that's most of what I meant there.
So, like, more so of a, well, it's kind of funny then how you did tie that to generational finger pointing. But the funny part is like that generation is finger pointing back at that generation, but that older generation is finger pointing towards the younger generation. So you do have that cyclical nature right then and there, because, you know, everybody's pointing at somebody else and nobody wants to take the blame. You know, it's like, it's basically who's left, you know, holding the bag while the cat's been out of the bag running around, you know, probably picking off virtue as a mouse left and right. And and it is funny because it's like, it's yeah, I mean, you could definitely see that there's memes of virtue and there's memes of vice. Obviously, I feel the right likes to embrace more so the virtuous characteristics, and the left definitely likes to go towards the godless vices. But it's not to say that we all don't have our vices, because we're all human beings. And that, to me, you know, is your own self-admittance of, like, making fun of yourself as, you know, like, if you could meme yourself, which I know I have with one of my more famous profile pictures, going onto Telegram and getting called a boomer, getting called, you know, something or other, just because of, you know, what, you know, I mean, I got memed, you know, I mean, it's funny because it's like, well, yeah, you guys are calling me a boomer, but yet you're embracing ideology that's post, or I'm sorry, that's pre, you know, World War II or pre World War I, maybe even post World War I, because it's like, yeah, I mean, they go around and, you know, oh yeah, we will call you a boomer and stuff. But I'm like, wait a minute. You're embracing ideology and all that stuff before even these boomers were born. So to me, like you've just memed yourself into something that you still don't understand. And it's funny because it's like I feel like sometimes that with the finger pointing from the older generation as like, you know, you youngins don't know what you're talking about kind of thing, kind of finger pointing is what I'm getting at. Like the old, you know, you had the grumpy old man as we obviously got to personify it, you know, as the grumpy old man telling you, you know, you don't know what you're talking about, you know, you listen up. You know, there's wisdom in that, obviously, because the old you know, I feel older people definitely have wisdom to share, and that's valuable. That's very valuable. But it's funny because it's like, you know, they're embracing something that's possibly older than our grandparents, possibly older than our great grandparents, and yet they have the nerve to call like older people online boomers. You know, it's kind of like, well, what? You know, that's a meme too. And that's you know, I mean, the humor is definitely there, and the irony is also definitely there, and that to me, you know, you're never short of irony or sarcasm. Like there's a constant supply of that. And that's, you know, that's where like the whole Pepe makes the sarcastic face because he knows what the elites are up to, or Doge making that smirk or angry face, you know, and then that one kid, that Covington Catholic kid that became famous for the smirk he had with somebody, you know, being in his face, and he wasn't bothering him at the time, you know. That whole thing once again became a meme, and you know, the left took it, you know, and obviously went out of control with it. But it's like you have this constant fuel to the fire for something that is as grassroots as it possibly could be, and the fact that, you know, they don't have any wisdom or any kind of self-reflection, because in a sense, self-reflection and making fun of yourself are also kind of forms of wisdom too. And like you said earlier, it's funny because it's true. Yeah, man. I mean, I don't think there's, you know, I don't think there's a truer statement than that, because you usually, like, when things aren't funny, you know, and if I feel if you're a pretty honest person, and if you're, you know, pretty virtuous, and you try to be a good person, you know, there'll be things that, you know, I guess, I don't know, like I guess a cringe, somebody's cringe are making jokes, probably like Amy Schumer. She's pretty cringe. But if she's like making jokes and stuff, and you're just kind of like, you know, not really that funny. You know, you can't, whatever. You know, you're kind of just being bombastic to just be bombastic. And then, you know, I mean, you got somebody who's funny, I guess, like genuinely, probably like Robin Williams, because, I mean, he was talented and he was also funny. And he also could do impressions and stuff, you know, so because that's, you know, that takes a level of talent to do that too. But he was genuinely funny, and you're laughing at him because he's saying funny things, but he's also, you know, true. You know, he's also using true humor too, because it's like there's that level of, like you said, where it starts to kind of go on that upward trend and hit its apex. And then by a certain point, it's kind of, you know, it's kind of ran itself ragged. And then by that point, you're kind of like, well, this is played out. But then there's that cyclical nature, that wisdom behind it. And, you know, like something like Keck, which is still so esoteric and still so strange to me, because of the god in Egyptian lore and mythology that he represented. You know, Keck literally represented chaos. And, you know, as we take it in a religious context, you know, chaos was that void. It was that chasm. It was that space where nothing existed until God, the gods, Titans, you know, whatever the mythology might be, Odin, kind of came into being and breathed life into the world, or created a tree, or planted a seed, or obviously with with the Christian God, our God, breathed life into the world. He spoke existence into being. And yeah, I mean, like that's literally where like nothingness, the void, chaos, that's where it comes from. And personifying that into a God across the board. And, I don't know who the Greek, to be honest, I don't know who the Greek God for chaos is, or the Norse Greek, or the Norse God for chaos. And, it's kind of funny because it's like you take an agent of chaos and like I said earlier, somebody basically memed themselves to president because of it. And that was grassroots. That was genuine. That was something that people fell back on, no matter what walk of life they came from in America. They were like, oh yeah, this guy, I feel good with this guy because, he's bringing something to the political class. That's what's needed. He's our guy. He's gonna throw his weight around and not really care. Well, it winds up obviously a little bit different, but it's one of those things where you said it really well, where it's not astroturfed. It's not something that's inorganic. And as decentralized as it is, somebody on the FBI or the CIA or go, oh well, they're just posting that autistic frog again. Like they don't understand it, And then at the same time, he could be feels good man the next week. It's funny because it's like where it goes and where it's supposed to end. It's like there's a continuum there that's not only cyclical, like you said, but that's exactly what a cycle is. A cycle is a continuum. And that's, and that's why I guess rhetoric gets used ad nauseum, because you have to add on top of that rhetoric, and you throw it into, I guess, a cycle, like a news cycle, and how lost the other side is now because of that guy who memed his way into office. How lost they are now because of him not being around, and that personification of evil for them and all whatever vices they maintain as holy or unholy, actually, but holy in an inverted kind of sense, is that you saw that apex, or I'm sorry, you saw that uptick hit that apex and has kind of died. It's died on the vine because of their embracing of, well, that nihilistic fuel that they all fed off of each other. And even though it was something that they saw was virtuous, in reality, it messed with them. It screwed them up, And to me, there's obviously occultism to it with all their symbols that they use, but there's also memes within that too, because if you think about on how ancient obviously our civilizations are, and how kind of before words, runes, and things of that nature, we were basically communicating to each other in a sense in memes with hieroglyphics and cave wall paintings. If you think about human behavior and and how we would symbolize something, the earliest humans were basically memeing to each other, on how to survive and how to tell a story.
Yeah. Any kind of, pictographic method of communication, the moment it starts to tell a story or a narrative is the moment it becomes a meme in that sense, in the broader sense of the word. And well, you talk about the runes being as kind of something after the fact, but runes are extremely mimetic. Um, you know, they are symbols, and it's interesting because in the Germanic mythology and the Germanic society before Christianization, runes had a double meaning. They could be used alphabetically, which they normally were not, just because most people had no use for writing in a pre-Christian setting. Um, they mostly started using them for actual writing very late, after they were settled down and had begun to actually build up sedentary societies, and started becoming like really developed. By which point they were usually getting Christianized. Um, Most of the time, when you see runic writing in a very literal sense, it's in Scandinavia after Christianization, as late as the 1300s. But the earlier use of runes, which is in a more kind of hieroglyphic, mimetic, symbolic style, that is what tied it to paganism. It served as kind of the way uh, that they communicated with their gods, and the way that they drew meaning, in a spiritual sense, from the world around them. So it's an interesting sort of dual purpose alphabet, the runes. Very interesting in and of itself. But, yeah, you could make an argument that Christian iconography is also mimetic. What is an icon? If it's depicting a story, if it's depicting a, scene that occurred, is that, especially in an age before widespread literacy in the church, when the icons were used to deliver meaning to a only semi-literate populace, that's exactly what it was. It was telling stories through an image. And usually it would be things like scenes from a gospel or the lives of a saint, or depiction of said saint. And it would just show to them the importance of what had happened, usually accompanied, of course, by the words of both the liturgy and, the priest's own homily, usually on whatever icons were brought to the fore, and their subjects. But, yeah. This is pretty universal. It's a very human concept, the meme. And it goes back extremely far in history.
Yeah, which makes it kind of neat, because it's like, if two different people are speaking two different languages, and let's say you don't know, like, the word water in a language, all you would have to do is do an image search on your phone, and boom, like if somebody doesn't know what you mean, and you pop up a picture of water and point at it, somebody's going to know what you want and what it is. So that right there, like, our communication styles have evolved in a sense with technology, rather than, obviously having to carve stone or write on a cave or draw on a cave wall, trying to show you what water means and how the means I need to go to get about acquiring it. So obviously, in a lot of ways, human behavior has evolved itself, but at the same time, well, like we said with the left, it's kind of devolved itself. And I'm a harsher critic on them than pretty much anything else. But the fact that they don't understand, and probably normies too, normies are more so people who are probably more so middle ground than anything. Where I was at and still kind of am, but it's kind of funny because it's how like communication styles for humans have changed, but at the same time, they really haven't. You know, it's just that information is obviously a lot more easily accessible. But if you have to show, if you don't speak the same language as somebody, or even if you do speak the same language as somebody, but you're trying to get a point across, a story across, or some kind of like, I guess, theme, communicative idea, something that's valuable to you, and you're trying to tell somebody else, what you might think of it, and they're still not catching on, and then all of a sudden, like you show them something, like a meme, or like you said, an icon, and then all of a sudden, the light bulb will, yeah, that's a meme too, but the light bulb will go off. They'll be like, oh, I got you now, or I gotta put in a Greek plug, Eureka. They're like, oh yeah, duh, like we got it. That's what it is. So it's interesting because it's like obviously communication is pretty big for human survival and human, and how human beings interact with each other. And being part of, I guess, something that's more organic outside of a centralized sphere of influence is good. But at the same time, we're communal creatures. So having centralized influence too is also, in our nature, is also kind of a part of who we are because we commune in our communities, we commune at different events, we commune at church, it's like a part of our nature to be social animals, to be social creatures. So it's kind of like, let's say you do have somebody in the community that doesn't, exactly speak English, or, is older, and you're trying to talk to them, or you're trying to get like ideas across and stuff. Like I know with my grandfather, as I mentioned him before, I've showed him a few memes on stuff, and he got a really, really big kick out of the whole 2016 election cycle too. But like he didn't get some of the stuff, some of the humor that I was sharing too, until, I showed him memes and stuff. And then all of a sudden, he busted out in laughter. Obviously, it still rings true. It's funny because it's true, and with that, having that generational connection, kind of it got the point across, So with that, we have more so of an idea on how to, like communicate, and obviously not be stuck in rhetoric, not be stuck in vices, adhere to, I guess, well, I don't want to say you should live a more virtuous life through memes, but I mean, if you're looking up church father quotations that are technically memes and icons, I guess you're doing, yeah, I mean, you're headed in the right direction when it comes to being virtuous, but yeah, like you said, I mean, it's kind of interesting because it's like, veneration, worship are two different things, and we definitely distinguish that, especially in the Orthodox Church. I can't say, when it comes to Catholics, I don't know exactly what their stance is on it. I've heard some weird arguments. I've heard some better arguments, but when it comes to like the Western understanding of a lot of things, especially, on how they see paganism kind of intertwined into Christianity, they would probably of icons as, probably straight up paganism. And you know, to me, there's obviously the memetics behind it, but you know, I mean, it's kind of strange because it's like, well, wouldn't you want to honor the saints of the church?
I don't know if you were trying to mute yourself there, but you kind of cut out after when you want to
Crap.
honor the saints of the church.
Okay. I did. Technical difficulties. Please stand by. No, I'm kidding. So like, wouldn't you want to kind of, you know, set that generational tone, you know, with the saints of the church? Wouldn't you want to show reverence and show respect for those whose life, you know, could be, you know, a set example, not, you know, not some other politician, not some other, you know, I guess, you know, rock star or athlete or, you know, whoever is your role model. Like, wouldn't you want somebody who's, you know, kind of beyond all of that? And, you know, in a sense, I guess you get kind of a mean continuum right there. So, you know, I mean, kind of lends itself to a better understanding, and obviously it's innately human. I mean, it's obviously within our realms of understanding, and you know what we might choose to understand or become, you know, or understand more or understand something new in a way as well. So I feel like a lot of it, you know, just attaches itself to straight up, you know, human behavior too.
Indeed. And I lost my train of thought. There was a specific point that you had made that I was really trying to kind of segue off of, but I kind of lost my where I was going with that. But yeah, well, I was going to say something about talking about the Western view of iconography and the like as being essentially paganistic. I don't want to get into polemics, but essentially that comes from just an ignorance of church history fundamentally. I had a really good discussion with my priest today about this sort of exact topic. Actually, for kind of the newcomers class, it was all about holy tradition. So we spent a good hour after the service talking all about that. So that's all on my mind now. But sadly, it's kind of outside the scope of what we're talking about today. So I don't really want to get too into that because it's just going to massively derail things. It'd be a positive derailing, but still one nonetheless. But with that aside, yeah, fundamentally, it's also human. There's really nothing in here that you can separate from the way we communicate, the deep psychological level. And, you know, there is a certain element within society and within, you know, a lot of groups that we frequent that will make the argument that narrative is kind of the root of evil in this sense. That baseless ideas, you know, cause all these problems, you know. But the opposite is also true. You can't properly communicate facts without a narrative to essentially show them to people who have no frame of reference to understand them, right? Humans communicate in narrative. They communicate in story. They communicate in memes, fundamentally, which is why they're so much more successful at spreading ideas than raw data. Because without context, without understanding of the significance of said data, it's meaningless. You know, it goes back to the whole church idea of scripture and tradition, but told myself I wasn't going to start going down that road today, so I won't. But yeah, it's so universal. You can tie this into so many different things. But yeah, there's a golden mean in so many things in life, and this is kind of the one time. Well, I say the one time, but I'm seeing it more and more often, where I start to sound like a bit of a centrist, not politically, but socially or just in worldview, because there is always danger in veering too far to one side or the other. Pure factual logic or pure ideals, pure accelerationism versus pure status quo. There, and even in theology, you often have kind of these golden mean scenarios that pop up where one heresy you'll be too far to one side and one be too far to the other. But more and more, it's just understanding, well, and at the most basic level in humans, the balance between the animal and the divine mind. Because we have our physical brain, we have, our flesh, which is created. It's, essentially that of an animal. Physiologically, there's very little difference. But we also have the image of God. We have the divine mind and the consciousness that comes with it and the free will that is imprinted onto us by the Lord. And this allows us to make things like logic, deductive reasoning. We're not just doing things off instinct or subconscious desire, but you need both. You can't operate purely off one or the other, or else you either become an animal or you become detached from the world and unable to work within it. So, as in all things, memes must serve that purpose. They can never take you over, and they can never be totally rejected either.
Nice point on the golden mean. And I feel like you said, obviously, we're all made up in the mind of God. We're all created in His image as well. And having that golden mean, like you said, well, not politically, but it's also kind of hard to, for a lot of people to separate religion and politics and not infuse that either, because they don't exactly understand that, and that's definitely not a golden mean thing to do. But to have that golden mean method and, to kind of get Socratic about it is to employ that Socratic method, ask the rational questions, ask the irrational questions, ask, yourself, what would I do in this situation? Or what would somebody else do in that situation? Like, those are very all fundamentally human behavioristic, even animal behavioristic too, in a lot of senses, because animals, as far as instinct goes, they obviously react on a lot of instinct and things too, but there's smart animals out there. Like, I've seen dogs solve problems before. I'm not saying they're doing calculus or anything, but on some fundamental levels, dogs can solve problems, but they rely on their instincts a lot of the times to do that as well. But obviously, that's a different conversation too. Like the whole iconography. But there is very like deep-seated fundamental things that go on, and in a lot of ways, may hit people differently. It may affect people differently as well, and it may make you think of things, totally unrelated, totally related. So there's the rational and irrational side to it. You know, and make you process like things differently. Whereas memes and the memetics of it all, I guess you could say, are like the philosophical spectrum of memes, how we communicate, you know, I guess our psychology as human beings and how we operate on those various levels, as to, like you said earlier, the image of the Clockwork Orange guy with his eyes wide open, you know, no sleep, just getting, you know, pounded with images. And like you said, they replaced those images with the meme words, which is pretty funny. But see, even right there, like there's more psychology to that too, because it's basically, you know, in that movie, they're programming him. You know, it's that mind control. So I mean, it's all right there. You know, I mean, it's so interesting too, because the human mind is something that is uncharted territory too. A lot of it is uncharted, and a lot of it is still undiscovered as to what we're exactly capable of. And did God intend it that way? I don't know. But like you said, you have to maintain a certain kind of ebb and flow to sustain yourself in society too. So, and you know, you can't completely escape with it at all from memes. You can't completely escape it, you know, from anything else. So I mean, it's all. I mean, could be going off on a tangent here, but it you know, it all kind of snowballs itself. I mean, I'm starting to snowball too, and I can tell. But you know what I mean? Like there's that momentum that's there, and there's different ways to go about it. And as you know, Orthodox Christians, you know, obviously walking the narrow path is a lot harder to do. But the payoff is a lot better. And with that golden mean kind of attitude, I guess in a sense, yeah, we definitely do try to exercise it when it comes to, you know, people who get hyperbolic, I guess, about politics, people who get hyperbolic about certain things, about certain topics. And then your other brothers and sisters from the other denominations of the faith, when, you know, they try to convince you of something that just doesn't jive with, you know, Orthodox philosophy and theology. So, you know, that right there could exactly be another meme. But, you know, like you said, it's weird to get loads and loads of data, because what do you do with it? You know, how do you drill all that data down into a few succinct points and have any kind of a format to it, you know? So I really like that you have to put the context into it, because obviously, you know, how do you explain to somebody, I guess Pep, you know, Keck, Pepe, or Doge without showing them a picture of it, you know? I mean, that's one of those things where, as a human being, you know, it'd be kind of weird to just try to describe it. I mean, it'd be creative, but to try to describe it in you know, in a sense, without showing the image of the supposed mascots.
Yeah, it's just a holistic method of communication. And, you know, we've kind of just hit the bedrock of what a meme fundamentally is already. You know, we're starting to cover in a pretty exhaustive fashion. Um, as far as we know today about human nature, because that pool of knowledge is ever expanding. But from the knowledge we have today, it's clear that memetics, that narrative, forms an integral part of all of our communications and the way that we think, the way that we formulate ideas. Um, so it's inevitable that you're going to see memes take center stage in the war of ideas that is our modern existence. You know, the what's fascinating to me is how exactly these came to prominence, right? How you sort of had a perfect storm of technology and disgruntlement and disillusion with society by groups of people who were not, advantaged, who were not the winners in society, so to speak. Because that's a common factor, right? A society may be fundamentally corrupt, but the people who are doing good off of it usually are not really going to notice. You have to be a very honest person with yourself to really sit down in a system that you directly benefit from or that maintains your livelihood and sit down and say, this is wrong. This is corrupt. That takes a level of self-reflection and just ability to view things in an unbiased manner that is extremely rare in a human. And for that reason, you usually don't see very much resistance to the status quo coming from the wealthy or coming from people who just do well for themselves under this system's current standards. Who materially and, I guess spiritually are satisfied, but it's the people who are not who will always come up with these ideas. And so when you have these disadvantaged, disillusioned groups getting online, which incidentally an overwhelming number of them gravitated towards as a means of escape from the society that they were kind of downtrodden in real life. It was a perfect storm. You had escapist technology that enabled mass communication and distribution of ideas, given to a group of people who had every reason to dislike society, who had all these grievances they wanted to air and had nowhere in real life to effectively air them. Nobody who could understand them. And now they're in a whole community of people like this. It's only inevitable that these people decided to engage in society-changing measures from there. And for better or worse, you've got plenty of good in these people because they've had time to sit back and reflect and really, consider what is sorely lacking in modern society, which is spiritual health and well-being. So many people have come to the truth through that. I know to some extent or another I have. But you also have very cancerous, toxic elements, which we interact with all the time on Telegram, much to your chagrin. But yeah, that's there's two sides to that coin, like always. But it's the perfect storm that occurred in around the turn of the 2010s. So going into the second decade of the 21st century, you had this perfect storm of internet communications and disgruntled young Americans and people throughout the world, but it was centered in America, who took to Photoshop and took to MS Paint and sort of created the new narrative of the 21st century, if you will. It sounds a bit grandiose for now when it hasn't fully played out, but I really think when we look back in 2050 or 2100, those of us that are still alive then, we'll look back and see that this sort of shaped reality in the 21st century. And I honestly believe that, I think more than what any agency does, more than what any central planner attempts to lay out for the future. I really feel like the ideas and the narrative of mankind drives things more than any of that.
Yeah, talk about now going full circle with that. You just did. Yeah, I mean, we definitely laid out a lot of bedrock when it comes to memes. Yeah, wow, that was really good. And as far as, yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say, because I mean that was pretty good. That's all I gotta say about that. Oh crap! I just memed again. Forrest Gump impression. But there is that momentum, and there is that. Well, I wouldn't call it grandiose, because the ideas with memes aren't always grandiose, and they aren't always the smallest minute thing either. You know, and they do have a golden mean to them as well, because you know, you're right, much to my chagrin, there is those extreme senses of a meme. Then there's, like the meek and the mild, and then there's certain other flavors that are just hilarious. Or, there's memes that make you think about things. And, you see like a philosophical statement on one, I guess. Talk about a motivational meme. But there are those certain instances where it makes you think about those things. It makes you think about, on how that context can fit into your life, and how that contextualization does work for you. And it does work well, probably in spite of, like you said, those that are, sick of what's going on. They come to an online community where, the majority of them agrees with them, or, agrees with them in some kind of capacity. So you do have that non-central or that decentralized sense of communication, that decentralized sense of community, which is kind of a strange thing to say, but you have it in a very broad spectrum, in a sense, in a diverse spectrum. And I'm not trying to sound like, forcing diversity and inclusion on anything, but it's funny because of Kekistan, I met people from across the world, and that's kind of cool. But, as it being, I guess, an American phenomenon, just like the boomer meme, it's you have that sense of community. Now you have other people you're talking to who share somewhat similar ideas with you, and then you get to communicate with them in a sense to share those ideas with. That's kind of a whole other level of communicating as something as fundamentally human as it is, which is mind-boggling. It's cool, but somebody's trying to communicate with your language and trying to talk to you with your language using your words. They're not exactly getting, the right words or, ideas across, but then they show you something, or then they tell you something, or like they tell a joke, or, like then you start to have like real honest interaction. And that's what's, that's so cool. That makes that grassroots part of it so much more valuable, so much more, and that need for human contact, that need for human communication. It makes it so entirely uniquely human that it's kind of funny on how we do personify animals in our memes. A scene from a movie in our memes, or like a landscape, with a, like you said, the motivational pictures, and it's now coming back as how stupid it is. But like they got a picture of like a car driving down, at kind of a good speed, and then like you have the word like drive underneath it, and then you say what drives you, blah blah blah. Well, it could be the motivational picture, kind of deal, and that's what's funny to me, because it's like you obviously don't have something that's human, you have something that's created by humans, but it's showing like that there is a constant momentum and momentous nature to this whole, to that whole continuum, the continuum of existence as it is. So, to me, like explaining explaining theosis to like a Protestant would probably make no sense. Probably make absolutely no sense to them. Explaining theosis to somebody who is Catholic would probably make a lot more sense. So it would probably help with memes, visuals, as well as definitions, to try to get that point across of what you're trying to say to somebody, no matter what, and if they speak the same language as you, that helps. But there's that constant momentum to human communication that a centralized algorithm just isn't going to understand. So with what you said about those different alphabet groups trying to figure out what you're trying, alphabet acronym groups, what you're trying to figure out what it means, then yeah, I mean, they're not going to have a stranglehold or any kind of monopoly on, what we're trying to accomplish. And then in a sense, what exactly are we trying to accomplish with trying to fit in to a society that we feel that we don't really fit in with, too, which is also another kind of dichotomy. But I'm done with that one.
Yeah, man, I don't know how much more on this there really is to cover, honestly. I feel like other than going in an exhaustive history of like lots of different particular memes, which I don't think we really have time to do, given we're about to hit 2 hours in about 10 minutes. But I think in terms of the general gist of memes and the broad history of them in the modern and ancient sense, I think we've about covered it. I certainly, other than covering specific memes and their unique inner workings and meanings, I can't think of much else to say on it, honestly.
All right, then. What is your favorite meme?
Oh, that's a tough one. I like a lot of them in different ways. I would say my favorite meme out of all of them right now has to be Doge. Like, I love Doge. He's just like the way that he's used nowadays is just so hilarious. Like, it can be so absurd and yet so hilarious.
What is your least favorite meme?
Probably the the woke jacks. Like they tried to take Wojak and turn them, like the leftists tried to make their own versions of them recently. Um, a lot of them were like non-white, like they were kind of really artificially pretty looking black women and stuff. But the one that I don't like is the one where they kind of have him looking like this tomboy type Wojak, but like a depressed, sad kid, you know. But they try to like make him into this, like poor, misunderstood, like sad boy kind of. But he's just like he's a lefty, and he's just no, it's just emo stuff. I'm not a fan of that.
I mean, emo music is kind of a meme itself, too. Emo kids are also memes. See, I mean, the continuum, it just goes on and on and on.
Yeah, but they're a sad meme. That's why I don't like them. I'm kind of I'm a bit more upbeat in the type of memes that I like. Like I like I guess memes that can be, I don't know, maybe a bit boyishly cruel, if that makes sense. Like ones that are just like, like you've chosen violence, but but they're always kind of upbeat. They're always lighthearted. They're never trying to elicit sympathy. I feel like that's just, I don't like. Well, okay. When I see men doing that, I get a deep sort of discomfort with that person because I can tell they're very subversive. They don't want to do things on their own merits. They constantly want to manipulate people's opinions of them to achieve their goals, and that just rubs me the wrong way. It's like, just come out, state what you're about, and have fun with it.
Yeah, I mean, like you said earlier, if you can't laugh at yourself, and that's something that obviously a lot of people in many walks of life are taking themselves too seriously. So, with that, I guess the seriousness, and the non-seriousness, we've definitely exhausted the whole meme topic, and it was nice to have a bit more of a lighthearted conversation. And with that, we got the Patriotarchy episode. This would be officially number 3 in the books. So, see y'all later.
Y'all have a good one.
Lord of dankness, my old friend, normies oppressing us again, watching commies flee on live streaming, farming keks with all this dank memeing, fight the brainwashing that was planted a while in Yale, fucking white male, fighting for social justice. In Linda's dreams I'd be a cuck, but I've no time for peaceful trucks, swimming through their sea of Marxist tears, allied with my fellow red pill peers. When my rage was stoked by the blur of an airborne ray, is the cult of commies, and in the Berkeley streets I saw 1,000 retards, maybe more. People shouting Nazi centrists, pissed off hysterical mass Bolsheviks. People crying racist, that shit we never said. And then they fled, disturbed by sense and logic. Privilege, oh you spoiled brat. Your bourgeois cult needs chemostat. Your gender studies teachers mislead you. Nurture violence against homo Jews. And it's you who claim we're Hitler's fans. It's time to face the mirror. Righteous people rose and that verdant God that they decreed. Kekistani so merry gay, proudly sing their anthem Shady Lane. And the Poles said that demon Hillary wouldn't ever have to take her loss. Can't stop the Trump. So much for social justice.
And I think that happens a lot on Angel. I think you are secretly sexist, and you probably won't put this in the video, but...
Well, no, I mean, I would...